The first thing anyone heard was the click. A sharp, metallic snap that cut through the still Afghan dawn like a warning shot from the earth itself. Every soldier in the patrol froze. Breath caught in throats. Weapons half-raised. Eyes darting from man to man, searching for who had done it. It was Specialist Rivera, a 24-year-old from El Paso, who stood with his left boot sunk slightly into the dry sand, face pale, hands trembling on his rifle. "Mine," he whispered, voice breaking. The squad leader, Staff Sergeant Harper, raised his fist, silent command. Nobody moved. Even the desert seemed to stop breathing. The morning wind had stilled. The buzz of flies went quiet. Every sound vanished except for Rivera's ragged breathing and the faint creak of his boot pressing against death. They had been moving in staggered formation through a narrow valley, flanked by jagged rock faces. Intel said the path was clear. Intel, as usual, was wrong. "All right, listen up," Harper said low and steady. He crouched, scanning the ground. The desert floor was a patchwork of loose sand and gravel. Here and there, slight depressions could be seen, barely visible in the pale light. Classic hand-laid minefield. "Son of a bitch," muttered Corporal Jensen, the squad's grenadier. "They boxed us in." Sergeant Harper's eyes flicked to the cliffs. The Taliban had done this before, herd a patrol into a minefield, then light them up from above. He saw nothing, but that didn't mean they weren't there, waiting. "Ma'am," whispered Private First Class Daniels, turning toward the team's newest addition, the one who wasn't supposed to be here. Lieutenant Sarah Keene had been attached to Harper's squad only 2 weeks ago, fresh out of Ranger School, one of the rare female officers to push through the grit and blood to earn her slot. The men had been polite but skeptical. Afghanistan had no shortage of ways to break a soldier. Bringing in someone untested felt like tempting fate. Now, standing a few feet behind Rivera, her eyes scanned the ground with clinical precision. She looked less like a green officer and more like someone calculating death. "Rivera, don't move," she said. "No shit," Rivera hissed through clenched teeth. Sweat poured down his face, dripping into the dust. Harper's radio crackled, almost making everyone jump. He silenced it immediately, but the damage was done. Rivera flinched, his boot pressing a fraction deeper. The click grew louder. "Jesus Christ." Rivera whimpered, tears welling in his eyes. Sergeant, I don't want to die out here, man." Harper crouched lower, heart pounding. He'd seen men lose limbs before, but this was different. They were boxed in, minds scattered around like invisible wolves. And if enemy eyes were above, watching, the clock was ticking before the ambush started. "Keene," Harper said. "Ideas?" She didn't hesitate. "Pressure release mine by the sound. Old Soviet design. Step down, you're fine. Step off, boom." Rivera's voice cracked. "You're telling me if I move I'm dead?" "Correct," she said bluntly. Silence. For a long, suffocating moment, nobody spoke. Then Daniels muttered, "We're screwed." "Shut it," Harper snapped. Keene scanned the field. She knelt, running her gloved hand just above the surface, not touching but feeling the subtle dips. "They laid these sloppily. Probably last night. The soil's disturbed. We can map a path." Harper stared at her. "You're saying walk them out?" "Yes, Sergeant." Her voice was calm. Too calm. "But someone has to move first." All eyes turned to Rivera, who looked like he might vomit. His lips trembled. Don't make me." "No," Keene said, cutting him off. "Not him. Me." Every man in the squad froze again, this time from shock. "You're insane," Jensen said. "One wrong step, you're paced." "That's war," Keene said flatly. Harper studied her. Her jaw was set, eyes steady. She wasn't bluffing. In that moment, Harper saw not the rookie officer but a soldier with ice in her veins. Before he could argue, she stepped forward. Every rifle in the squad jerked slightly as if bracing for the explosion. The desert held its breath. Keene's boot pressed into the sand, slow, deliberate. No click. No blast. She exhaled once, a tiny puff of relief, then crouched low, scanning ahead. "Follow my steps exactly," she ordered. "Do not deviate, not by an inch." "Copy?" The squad nodded, too stunned to argue. Rivera swallowed hard, sweat dripping into his lips. He was still locked in place, his foot hovering over death. "Lieutenant," Harper said carefully. "He's still on it. We move, he dies." Keene looked back at Rivera. His face was streaked with tears, chest heaving. She locked eyes with him. "Rivera, listen to me. On my count, shift all your weight forward. One clean step. I'll clear the spot in front of you." Rivera shook his head violently. No, I can't. "You can," Keene snapped. Her tone was sharp, commanding, leaving no room for doubt. "Do it, soldier. Or we all die here." Rivera's lips trembled. But something in her voice, steel wrapped in certainty, cut through the panic. He nodded once, jerky and terrified. Keen stepped carefully, eyes sweeping for the shallow disturbance that marked another mine. She found a safe patch, tapped it with her knife, then looked back. "On three. 1, 2, 3. Rivera screamed as he lunged forward. His boot lifted from the mine, leaving the pressure plate exposed. For half a second, the squad expected the explosion. But nothing came. Rivera collapsed onto his knees in the clear patch, sobbing. Behind him, the faint circle of metal gleamed under disturbed sand where his foot had been. "See," Keen said calmly. "Manageable." The men exchanged stunned glances. Daniels muttered, "She's crazy." "Maybe," Harper said, still watching Keen with new eyes. "But she's alive. And so are we." They began the slow march forward, each step mapped by Keen's knife and eyes. The sun climbed higher, heat baking their helmets. Sweat rolled down spines, rifles dug into shoulders, nerves screamed with every crunch of gravel. Halfway through, a crack echoed from the cliffs above. A bullet slammed into the dirt inches from Jensen's boot. "Contact!" Harper roared. The squad dove instinctively, but stopped short. Mines. One wrong move and the desert would chew them alive. The enemy had them exactly where they wanted, stuck between fire and explosions. Rounds pinged off the rocks. Dust sprayed. Rivera curled up, hands over his helmet. Keen didn't flinch. She dropped to one knee, slowly, controlled, and raised her M4. Her shot cracked back at the cliffs, precise and sharp. "Return fire carefully," Harper barked. The squad adjusted, kneeling low, firing in measured bursts. Nobody dared dive or crawl. Every motion was controlled, deliberate. Sweat and fear mingled with the smell of gunpowder. Jensen cursed, fumbling a reload. "We're fish in a damn barrel." "Shut up and shoot," Harper snapped. Keen's voice cut through the chaos. "Left ridge, 2 shooters. Daniels, adjust fire 3 meters high." Daniels obeyed, sending rounds sparking off the ridge. One Taliban fighter tumbled down the rocks, his scream cut short. The firefight stretched on, seconds feeling like hours. Every movement was survival, every bullet a gamble. Finally the gunfire thinned. The cliffs fell quiet. Dust drifted in the scorching air. The squad held still, ears straining. Nothing. The enemy had withdrawn. One by one, rifles lowered. Breaths released. Keen stood slowly, scanning the cliffs. Her face was pale but steady. "We need to move. They'll regroup." Harper met her eyes. For the first time he nodded in respect. "Lead on, Lieutenant." Step by step, she guided them through the minefield, each boot print a fragile promise of survival. When they finally stumbled clear, the squad collapsed behind a dune, sucking air, laughing nervously, cursing in relief. Rivera kissed the dirt like it was holy ground. Harper sat heavily, helmet in his hands. His squad was alive. Against the odds they had survived. And it was because of her. Keen wiped dust from her face, eyes scanning the horizon. She didn't smile. She didn't relax. Because she knew this was just the beginning. Somewhere in the cliffs behind them, the enemy had seen everything. And they would not let it go. The war had just gotten personal. The desert didn't forgive. It didn't forget. By the time Harper's squad staggered out of the minefield, they weren't celebrating. They were bleeding from the nerves, drenched in sweat, and already running out of water. Their boots crunched through gravel that felt less like dirt and more like broken glass. Every man knew it. The enemy had seen everything. He knew it too. She didn't sit when the squad collapsed behind a dune. She crouched, rifle in hand, eyes sweeping the jagged cliffs that hemmed the valley. She wasn't looking at the ridges, they were too obvious. She was watching the shadows between rocks, the gullies that disappeared into black, the places where a man could hide and wait for revenge. Harper dropped beside her, dragging his helmet off. His face was red from heat and strain, sweat dripping from his beard. "They'll hit us again." She nodded. "They won't let us walk away. That minefield wasn't just random. It was designed to trap us for that ambush." "Then why pull back?" Harper asked. She wiped dust from her lips. "Because they're patient. They know we're low on water, low on morale. They want us to move deeper into the valley, make us bleed every step. They don't need to win in one fight. They'll cut us down piece by piece." The squad listened, though nobody spoke. Rivera was still shaking, face gray as chalk, his hands clamped on his rifle like it was the only thing keeping him alive. Jensen was chewing on something invisible, jaw tight. Daniels fiddled with the safety of his weapon, a nervous tick. Finally, Jensen muttered, "We need air support." A drone. Something. Harper shook his head. "We're too far out. Comms are garbage in these canyons. Closest relay is 30 clicks back. Command thinks we're on a clean patrol. They don't even know we're in the shit." "Then what?" Daniels asked, voice breaking slightly. "We just sit here and wait to get hit again?" Keen's eyes narrowed. "No. We move. Tonight." Rivera let out a bitter laugh, thin and shaky. "Move where? Into another minefield? You saw what they did. We take one wrong step, we're confetti." Keen turned to him, her tone sharp. "We're soldiers, Rivera. Not confetti. You're breathing because we moved. You want to keep breathing, you trust me and you move again." He swallowed hard but didn't argue. Harper studied her for a long moment. She was young, too young, but she had something he couldn't deny, cold, brutal clarity. He gave a short nod. "All right. Nightfall. We'll move under cover. Stay quiet, keep tight. Keen leads." The sun bled out across the horizon, staining the mountains red as if the desert itself was wounded. Darkness crawled in fast, smothering the heat, dragging the temperature down to a bone-aching chill. They moved single file, Keen at the front, Harper bringing up the rear. Each step was careful, deliberate, boots crunching softly on gravel. The moon hung low and sharp, cutting shadows across the valley. Hours passed. The silence was broken only by their breathing, the distant scrape of loose stones. Keen scanned every patch of earth, every dip in the sand. Her mind ran like a machine. Disturbed soil, pattern of placement, probability of traps. The Taliban weren't engineers, but they were cunning. She treated every step like it was her last. Behind her, Rivera whispered, "Ma'am, how the hell are you so calm?" "I'm not," she whispered back without turning. "I'm just good at hiding it." The squad chuckled softly, the first sound of humor since the firefight. For a second, the weight lifted. For a second, they weren't dead men walking. Then the night shattered. A rocket-propelled grenade screamed from the ridge, slamming into the ground a dozen meters ahead. The blast lit the desert in white fire, hurling sand and rock into the air. "Contact!" Harper bellowed. Bullets tore from the ridges, hammering the ground around them. The squad dove, this time into open desert, free of mines but not free of fire. Tracers cut the night, snapping past their heads. "Cover! Find cover!" Harper roared, but the valley offered little more than scattered rocks and shallow depressions. Keen hit the dirt, her rifle barking as she returned fire. "Left ridge, 3 shooters, elevated," she shouted. Jensen unleashed grenades from his M203, explosions lighting the ridgeline. Screams echoed. Daniels cursed, rounds sparking off the stone he hid behind. "They're pinning us down. We're boxed." Keen's brain raced. They couldn't win a static fight. The enemy had high ground, numbers, and patience. The squad would be chewed apart. "Harper!" she shouted over the gunfire. "We move south toward that gully." She pointed to a dark cut in the rock ahead. "It could be a trap." Harper barked back. "Staying here is death." Another RPG slammed into the rocks near Rivera, the blast tossing him like a rag doll. He screamed, clutching his leg. Blood sprayed the sand. "Medic!" Harper roared, but the squad had none. They were alone. Keen crawled to Rivera, dragging him into shallow cover. His thigh was shredded, blood pouring through torn fabric. His face twisted in agony. "Stay with me, Rivera," she said, voice sharp and firm. She ripped open her kit, hands steady despite the chaos. Tourniquet high and tight. Pressure. Blood flow slowed. He gasped, eyes wide, but she slapped his helmet lightly. "Look at me. You're not dying here. Not today." Gunfire raged. Bullets sparked inches away. Harper was shouting, Jensen cursing, Daniels screaming prayers into the dirt. Keen's eyes flicked to the gully. Dark, narrow, steep. It might lead them out. It might lead them straight into hell. But it was the only option. She grabbed Harper's shoulder. "We can't hold. We push." He hesitated only a second, then nodded. "On me." "Smoke out." Jensen yelled, lobbing grenades that erupted into thick white plumes. The night filled with haze, swallowing tracers, blinding the enemy's aim. "Move! Move!" Harper roared. Keen slung Rivera's arm over her shoulder, half carrying him, half dragging him through the dust. The squad sprinted, weaving, firing blindly into the smoke. Bullets cracked past, some blind, some too damn close. They stumbled into the gully, its walls rising around them like jagged teeth. The gunfire faded, muffled by stone. They didn't stop running. Not until their lungs burned and their legs threatened to give. Not until the night swallowed the battle behind them. Finally, Harper called, "Halt." They collapsed against the rock walls, gasping, coughing, sweat and dust streaking their faces. Rivera groaned, leg bleeding but stable. The smoke and chaos had bought them escape, but only for now. Harper leaned against the stone, chest heaving. That was too close. "No such thing in combat," Keene said, checking Rivera's wound again. Her voice was hoarse but steady. "There's alive and there's dead. That's it." Jensen spat dust, glaring at her. "You keep talking like a goddamn robot, ma'am. You ever gonna admit you're scared?" She looked at him, eyes sharp in the moonlight. Every second. Silence fell. Even Jensen couldn't argue with that. For a long moment, the only sound was Rivera's ragged breathing and the distant echo of the battle they'd left behind. Then Harper spoke, voice low. "They'll hunt us. They know this terrain better than we do. And command still doesn't know we're out here in the meat grinder." Daniels slumped against the rock, eyes hollow. "So what? You're saying we're dead men walking?" Harper's gaze shifted to Keene. Not a word passed, but the meaning was clear. She had the plan, she had the nerve, and right now she was the one holding them together. Keene stood slowly, brushing dust from her gear. She scanned the gully, eyes narrowing as if she could see beyond the stone, beyond the night. "No," she said finally. "We're not dead men walking." She adjusted her rifle, tightening the strap. "We're ghosts now. And ghosts don't get hunted. They haunt." The squad looked at her, surprised. For the first time since the minefield, there was no disbelief in their eyes. Just the faint spark of something else, hope wrapped in defiance. Rivera groaned softly, drifting toward unconsciousness. Keene adjusted his bandage, whispering so only he could hear. "You're going home. I'll drag you there myself if I have to." Harper watched her, then turned to the men. "You heard the lieutenant. We move at dawn. Quiet, fast, mean. No more getting hurted. From now on we choose where the fight happens." The squad nodded, exhausted but determined. Above them, the moon slid behind a cloud, plunging the gully into deeper shadow. Somewhere out there the enemy was regrouping, sharpening blades in the dark. But for the first time Harper's squad wasn't just surviving. They were planning. And Sarah Keene, rookie lieutenant, untested officer, was no longer a question mark. She was the reason they were still breathing. As the night deepened and silence settled over the gully, the desert held its breath again. The next move belonged to them. But the enemy was already waiting. And in war, waiting was just another kind of weapon. The gully was colder than anyone expected. The desert was supposed to be hot, relentless. But here, with jagged walls rising on either side, the night air cut into the squad like icy blades. Breath turned to mist. The rocks sweated with condensation. Every sound, the scrape of boots, the rattle of gear, echoed unnaturally loud as if the gully itself were listening. Lieutenant Sarah Keene didn't mind the cold. The cold meant alertness, clarity. Heat dulled men, slowed their reflexes, made them sloppy. The cold sharpened everything, the mind, the nerves, the fear. And right now, fear was keeping them alive. Rivera drifted in and out of consciousness as she half carried, half dragged him forward. His face was pale, teeth chattering, sweat and blood soaking his fatigues. She checked his pulse again, still strong, still steady. He'd lost a lot of blood, but the tourniquet was holding. For now. Harper moved ahead of her, scanning the gully with his rifle raised. He didn't speak much anymore. Words were wasted energy. Every ounce of focus was needed for survival. Behind them, Daniels and Jensen followed, rifles sweeping, eyes darting to every shadow. The silence was broken by Daniels whispering, "We're ghosts, huh?" Jensen shot him a glare. "Shut it. You'll wake the dead." Keene smirked despite herself. "Dead don't need waking. They're already here." The men fell quiet again, her words hanging heavy in the air. They moved until dawn bled over the horizon. The sky turned from black to purple to a blinding gold, the sun crawling over the mountains like an ambush of its own. Shadows shrank, exposing everything. The gully widened, spitting them into a barren plateau dotted with boulders and broken scrub. Harper signaled halt. The squad crouched low, catching their breath. Their canteens were nearly empty. Lips cracked, throats raw, eyes bloodshot. Keene pulled out the map, creases torn, edges smudged with sweat. She traced their position with a dirty finger. "If we cut east, there's supposed to be a dried riverbed that leads to the old Soviet outpost. Command used it as a relay years back. Might still be gear there. Maybe comms." "Maybe," Jensen muttered. "Or maybe it's crawling with Taliban. Old Soviet bases are like honeypots for these guys. Better than dying of thirst out here, Harper said. Keane folded the map. Decision made. East. They moved in staggered formation, eyes sweeping the rocks. Every bird's cry made them flinch. Every gust of wind felt like a rifle barrel aimed at their backs. 2 hours into the march, Rivera stirred awake, groaning. Keane adjusted him gently, whispering, "Still with me?" He nodded weakly. "Hurts?" "I know." She offered the last of her water, tilting the canteen to his cracked lips. Small sips. He coughed, swallowing, then whispered, Why'd you stay back there? Could have left me. Saved yourself." Keane didn't answer at first. She adjusted his sling, checked his bandage. Finally, she said quietly, "Because soldiers don't leave each other behind. Not on my watch." Rivera's eyes welled, but he closed them, drifting back into uneasy sleep. Harper, overhearing, gave her a look, something between respect and worry. By midday the heat returned with a vengeance. The plateau baked them alive. They stripped off gloves, loosened vests, tongues swollen and dry. The promise of a riverbed felt like a cruel joke. Then Jensen froze, raising a clenched fist. Everyone dropped instantly. "Talk," Harper whispered. "Tracks," Jensen said, pointing at the dirt ahead. Clear footprints, dozens of them, cutting across the plateau. Not old. Maybe a day, maybe hours. Daniel's face tightened. "Taliban." "Who else?" Jensen hissed. Keane studied them. The spacing, the depth, the pattern. Her brain cataloged details like a computer. Not patrol. Too many. Civilians maybe. Or fighters moving supplies. "Either way," Harper said, "we stay off their trail. Circle wide." They adjusted course, keeping low, weaving between boulders. But the tracks haunted them, always intersecting their path, always reminding them they weren't alone. As the sun sank again, they found the riverbed, dry, cracked, lined with jagged reeds that whispered in the wind. Relief washed over them until Jensen knelt, frowning at the sand. Fresh prints. Boots. Not ours. Harper swore under his breath. Keane scanned the horizon. "We keep moving. Quiet." They slipped into the riverbed, shadows stretching long under the fading sun. The ground was soft, sucking at their boots, muffling their steps. For a moment, it felt safe, concealed by the banks, hidden from the ridges. Then a voice rang out. Harsh, guttural. Not English. The squad froze. Shouts followed, echoing from up ahead. Dark silhouettes emerged at the far bend. Armed men, rifles slung, moving in loose formation. "Taliban." Jensen whispered, "Shit. They're right on the route." Harper's jaw clenched. "Options." "Ambush," Daniels whispered. "We hit them hard, take their gear, maybe a radio?" King shook her head. "Too many. At least a dozen. Maybe more behind. We fire, we die." "So what?" Jensen hissed. "We hide and pray?" Her eyes darted to the riverbank, steep, rocky but climbable. "Barely. We get out of the bed. Now." Harper hesitated, then nodded. "Go." They scrambled up the bank, boots slipping on loose stone, fingers clawing at dirt. Rivera groaned, dead weight on Keane's shoulder, but she hauled him with raw strength. The Taliban voices grew louder. Shadows stretched. Keane reached the top, dragging Rivera over the lip just as the enemy rounded the bend below. She pressed flat to the ground, heart hammering. The Taliban squad marched beneath them, rifles glinting in twilight. Close enough to hear their laughter. Close enough to smell their sweat. One fighter paused, looking up at the bank. Keane held her breath, finger tight on the trigger. The fighter spat, adjusted his scarf, and moved on. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the last man disappeared around the bend. Only then did the squad breathe again. "Jesus," Jensen whispered. "We're ghosts all right. That was too damn close." Keane didn't answer. Her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, where the Soviet outpost was supposed to be. A dark silhouette rose in the distance. Crumbling towers, broken walls. Oh, or a trap. They reached the outpost by nightfall. The place was a ruin of rusted metal and cracked concrete, rebar jutting like broken bones. Bullet holes scarred the walls. The smell of rot lingered in the wind. Harper signaled them in, rifles raised. "Clear it." They moved room by room, kicking in doors, checking corners. Rats scurried through the rubble. A half-buried Soviet helmet lay in the dirt, skull still inside. Daniels gagged. "This place is cursed." "Everything out here is cursed," Harper muttered. Finally, they gathered in what had once been a command room. A shattered radio sat on a desk, wires chewed, antenna broken. Keen crouched beside it, examining. Dead. But maybe parts are salvageable. Doesn't matter if we don't have power, Jensen said. Maybe there's a generator, Harper said. They searched. In the basement, beneath the rubble, they found one. An ancient Soviet generator, rusted but intact. A miracle. Keen wiped grime from the casing, eyes narrowing. If we can rig this, we might get the radio online. Call for exfil. Jensen kicked the metal. Or blow ourselves to hell trying. She ignored him, pulling tools from her kit. Hand steady, mind sharp. Wire stripped, connections tested, fuel lines cleaned. She worked like a surgeon, the squad watching in silence. After an hour, she looked up. Try it. Harper pulled the crank. The generator coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. The room vibrated with power. For the first time in days, the squad grinned. Keen turned to the radio, splicing wires, patching circuits. Static filled the air. Then, copy, this is Overlord, repeat. Overlord, do you copy? The squad erupted. Relief, laughter, curses of joy. Harper grabbed the mic. Overlord, this is Reaper Squad. We're alive, requesting immediate extraction. Coordinates. The radio cut to static. Keen cursed, adjusting dials. Nothing. Silence. Then, faintly, a voice, low, unfamiliar, speaking in Pashto. Not Overlord. Taliban. The squad froze. They had been heard. Harper's face went white. They're coming. As if on cue, a shot cracked outside. A bullet punched through the wall, spraying dust. Shouts followed. Dozens of them. Surrounding the outpost. Jensen whispered, "We're trapped." Keen's eyes narrowed. Her hand tightened on her rifle. No. We're cornered. There's a difference. Outside, the desert roared with enemy fire. The battle for survival had only just begun. The mountain air was colder than the desert, biting and thin, each breath harder to draw as the squad ascended deeper into enemy territory. Snow clung to the ridges and patches, and beneath the white lay jagged rock and shadowy gullies where ambushes could hide. The SEALs moved in silence, their bodies aching, their gear heavier than it should have been after days without real rest, but discipline kept them steady. Every step was measured, deliberate, their boots leaving barely a trace. Morales trudged in the lead, his rifle angled low but ready. His eyes flicked constantly between the horizon and the uneven ground. Behind him, West carried the radio on his back, occasionally adjusting the antenna so it didn't scrape rock and give them away. Daniels walked behind the others, weapons slung across his chest, but his mind seemed elsewhere, somewhere darker. Avery kept him within sight, worried. He'd seen enough men carry the weight of a lost friend and let it eat them alive. They had lost Collins 2 nights ago. Ambushed. And though the mission demanded they keep moving, every face carried that shadow, that invisible reminder of how fragile this fight was. No one said her name out loud, not yet, but Avery knew the silence was louder than any eulogy. Contact left 200 meters, Morales whispered suddenly, dropping to a knee. His hand signaled the squad to spread out. Avery hit the ground, peering through the scope. Figures moved among the rocks, shadows slipping into position. The enemy had spotted them first this time, and that shifted everything. A crack split the air, then another, bullets ricocheting off stone, sparks dancing in the cold light. The SEALs returned fire, but the high ground favored the enemy. Rounds zipped down from above, forcing them flat against the slope. Shards of stone rained over them with every impact. They've got overwatch on us. West hissed, adjusting the radio's antenna as he rolled behind a boulder. We're pinned? Avery's brain worked fast. They couldn't stay here. If they did, they'd be bled out piece by piece. He scanned the slope, caught sight of a narrow crevice to the right. A gamble, but it offered cover. Morales, Daniels, lay down suppressing fire. West with me. Avery barked. Morales's machine gun rattled, thunder in the valley, spraying lead at the ridgeline. Daniels fired short bursts, jaw clenched, forcing the enemy to duck for cover. Avery sprinted low, sliding into the crevice with West close behind. The air grew colder as shadows wrapped around them, but at least bullets couldn't reach. Signal air support? West asked, panting. Negative, Avery said. Too exposed, too many manpads in this area. Command said no birds unless it's life or death. He tapped his headset. We find a way up, we flank them. Morales, Daniels, hold your position. Keep them guessing. The climb was brutal. Jagged rock tore at gloves, boots slipped on ice. Each movement felt like it drained twice as much energy as it should. West grunted behind him, cursing softly as he heaved himself upward. Avery's mind focused on every handhold, every crack, every next breath. He couldn't think about Collins. He couldn't think about how exposed they were. Just the climb. They crested the ridge behind the enemy position. 5 militants crouched with rifles braced against boulders, firing down at Morales and Daniels. They hadn't noticed the flanking maneuver yet. Avery gave the signal. 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. On 1, he and West opened fire, controlled bursts slamming into the militants from behind. 2 went down instantly, their bodies rolling lifeless down the rocks. The others scrambled, shouting in a language Avery didn't understand but knew all too well. They spun to return fire, but West dropped another with precise shots. The last 2 retreated into a narrow cave opening, disappearing into the dark. Cave, West said, breathing hard. Bet that's their supply hole. Maybe even a hideout. Avery's instinct screamed. A cave meant explosives, traps, maybe more fighters hiding deeper inside. But it was also the kind of place that could hold intel, maps, comms, anything that explained why enemy fighters had been massing in this sector. Clear it, Avery ordered. They regrouped, Morales and Daniels climbing up to join them. Daniels's face was pale, sweat beading despite the cold. His hands twitched around his rifle like he wanted to strangle the cave itself. Avery caught his eyes, gave him a steady look. Keep it tight. Watch your spacing. No one plays hero. They entered. The cave swallowed them whole, darkness pressing in. Flashlights mounted on rifles cut narrow beams through the black. The smell of damp stone mixed with something worse, burnt powder, sweat, unwashed bodies. The deeper they moved, the more claustrophobic it became, the walls narrowing until they brushed shoulders. A noise echoed from ahead. Footsteps. A whisper. Then the metallic click of a weapon being readied. Down? Avery hissed. The cave erupted in gunfire, muzzle flashes lighting the walls like strobe lights. Bullets cracked past their heads, chipping stone, sparking in the dark. The SEALs fired back, advancing in bursts. Morales's machine gun thundered, drowning out everything else, the sound ricocheting inside the cavern until it felt like the earth itself was breaking apart. Then silence. Smoke hung thick, making every breath bitter. Avery advanced, rifle raised. 2 bodies sprawled on the cave floor, weapons still clutched in their hands. But something felt wrong. Too easy. A beeping sound confirmed it. Fast, insistent, electronic. Bomb? West shouted. They dove as the back of the cave lit with fire. The explosion roared, a wave of heat and rock slamming into them. Dust filled every crevice, choking, blinding. Avery's ears rang, his body rattled, but somehow he was alive. Morales groaned somewhere in the haze, Daniels cursed, West was already pulling himself to his feet. The cave mouth had partially collapsed, sealing their exit. Not completely, but enough that crawling out meant exposure to anyone waiting outside. Options? West asked, coughing. Push through, Avery said. If they planted one device, there may be more. We sit, we die. Morales spat blood, wiped his mouth. Lead the way, boss. Let's finish this. They pushed deeper, the tunnel winding, twisting, until it widened suddenly into a chamber lit by a single lantern. Wooden crates lined the walls, stamped with foreign markings. Munitions, supplies, maybe even smuggled tech. In the center lay a map spread across a crate, stones holding it down. Avery moved to it, scanning fast. It showed the valley network, red circles marking routes, ambush points, supply lines. His stomach tightened. This wasn't just a local cell. This was coordination on a level he hadn't seen in months. Someone had organized these fighters into something sharper, deadlier. Before he could process it, a voice echoed from the shadows. Calm, measured, almost amused. You've come far, soldiers. But every step you take in these mountains belongs to us. A figure stepped into the lantern light. Not in ragged clothing but in fatigues, clean, deliberate. His accent was faint, European maybe, his eyes sharp. He carried himself like someone who had been trained, not just raised in the chaos of war. Daniel stiffened, raising his rifle. Avery lifted a hand to hold him back. Who are you? Avery demanded. The man smiled faintly. A teacher. And you are trespassers. Gunfire rattled behind them, deeper in the tunnel, more fighters closing in. The chamber became a trap, exits narrowing, enemies converging. Avery's mind raced, balancing options against survival. The intel on the map was priceless, but if they stayed to fight, they'd be buried in this hole. We're outnumbered, Morales muttered. Boss, call it. Avery's hand hovered over the radio switch. Extraction was miles away, air support was risky, and every second they hesitated, the noose tightened. He made the decision. Grab the map. Blow the rest. We move now. Daniels tore the map free, folding it against his chest. Morales primed a charge, slapping it against the crates. They bolted, pushing through a side passage as voices shouted behind them. The cave shook again as the explosives went off, fire swallowing the chamber. Heat chased them down the tunnel, smoke biting at their lungs. They burst out into freezing night, tumbling onto the rocks, coughing half-blind. The stars stretched endless above, indifferent to their survival. The mountain behind them smoldered, flames spitting from the cave mouth. No one spoke for a long moment, only gasps and the crackle of burning supplies. Then West laughed, short and bitter. "Guess they know we're here now." Avery pulled himself upright, looking back at the destruction. His ribs ached, his ears still rang, but his mind was sharp, too sharp. The man in the cave, the teacher, wasn't local, wasn't random. And that meant someone was pulling strings far larger than anything Command had warned them about. The map crinkled in Danielle's hand. Avery's gaze lingered on it. Every red circle meant danger ahead, but also the path forward. "We're not done," he said quietly. "This just got bigger. And whoever that man was, he won't stop." Danielle's voice was hoarse. "Neither will we." The wind howled down the mountain, carrying the smell of smoke and war. The squad adjusted their gear, tightened their grips, and began moving again into the night, shadows swallowed by shadows, knowing the fight was only just beginning. The cold mountain wind cut through every layer of fabric as the SEALs pressed deeper into hostile territory, their boots crunching softly over loose stone and patches of hard ice. Each man carried the weight of exhaustion, but it wasn't just physical. The memory of Collins's death still haunted them, the explosion in the cave still rang in their bones, and the sight of that mysterious man, calm, calculated, commanding, gnawed at Avery's mind like a splinter he couldn't dig out. Daniels walked near the front, the map clutched in a waterproof pouch strapped to his chest. He hadn't spoken much since the firefight, but his eyes burned with something dangerous, a mix of grief and determination that worried Avery. West trudged just behind him, one hand steadying the radio antenna as he muttered curses about the thin air and the endless climb. Morales lagged a few paces back, machine gun slung across his chest, his usually steady humor gone quiet. They had to reach extraction, but Command wouldn't even consider sending a bird unless they made it closer to the designated zone, still days away. Until then, it was them against the mountain, and against an enemy that now knew they were here. Movement on the ridgeline, Morales whispered suddenly, freezing mid-step. He raised a gloved hand, signaling halt. Avery crouched instantly, bringing his rifle up. The others mirrored him, dropping low. Shadows flickered across the jagged crest above them. 1, 2, 5 silhouettes, moving fast and precise. Too organized to be just locals with rifles. "They're tracking us," West muttered. "Again." "Not just tracking," Avery said. His gut churned. "Hurting." The enemy didn't fire immediately. Instead, they shifted, cutting off angles, forcing the SEALs to adjust their path down into a narrow valley. It was deliberate, unmistakable. Whoever was commanding these fighters knew what they were doing. "Ambush ahead," Avery whispered. "Stay sharp. Don't give them what they want." The squad moved cautiously, hugging cover, scanning every boulder, every outcropping. The silence was heavier than gunfire, a suffocating weight pressing down. Then it broke. Machine gun fire ripped from the cliffs, tracers sparking through the dark, ricocheting off stone. The valley lit in bursts of orange and white. The SEALs dug behind scattered rocks, returning fire as the ambush closed around them. Daniels fired furiously, too furiously, spraying rounds with little discipline. Avery grabbed his shoulder, forcing him down. Control burst. "Don't waste it." "I'm not wasting it, I'm killing them." Daniels snapped, face twisted with rage. He popped up again, sending a wild string of fire before ducking back. Morales laid down steady, measured streams of suppression, his weapon chattering with brutal rhythm. "They've got numbers on us, boss. At least 20. West, smoke right side," Avery ordered. West hurled a smoke grenade into the wind, the canister hissing as thick gray plumes spread, cloaking the right flank. Under the cover, Avery signaled movement. The squad crawled, shuffled, shifted position, working their way toward a small ravine cut into the valley wall. It was the only path out, narrow and steep, but it beat dying in the open. Bullets followed them, pinging off rocks, but the smoke bought precious seconds. They slid into the ravine, scrambling upward, boots slipping on loose shale. The climb was desperate, every muscle burning, lungs screaming for oxygen. Halfway up, Morales slipped, his foot skidding off a ledge. Avery lunged, grabbing his arm and yanking him back just as a burst of fire shredded the rock where Morales's body would have been. "Saved your ass," Avery grunted. "Don't let go and I'll buy the first round when we're home," Morales panted. They made it over the lip, rolling into cover as enemy fire slammed the ridge behind them. For a moment, it was quiet again, only their ragged breaths and the howl of wind through the peaks. Daniels slammed his fist into the dirt. "We can't keep running. They'll just keep coming. We need to hit back." Avery looked at him, steady but firm. "We hit back when it matters. Right now, survival matters." Daniels's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with frustration. But he said nothing more. They moved again, pushing through rough terrain under moonlight. The mountains stretched endless, ridges cutting against the stars, valleys yawning like maws below. Every sound carried, every breath felt exposed. By dawn they found temporary shelter in an abandoned shepherd's hut, little more than crumbling stone walls and a roof barely holding together. They collapsed inside, backs against cold stone, weapons close at hand. Morales finally broke the silence. "Boss, that guy in the cave, he wasn't just some local warlord. You saw it. He moved like one of us. Trained. Professional." Avery nodded slowly. "Yeah. And he knew we'd be there." West frowned. "You think Command's feeding us bad intel? Or is there a leak somewhere else?" "No idea," Avery said. "But we just became pawns in someone else's game." Daniels's voice cut in sharp. "Then we stop playing. We find him. We take him out. For Collins." The hut went quiet. Everyone felt the weight of Collins's name. Avery looked at Daniels, seeing the fire in his eyes. "Dangerous fire." "You want revenge," Avery said evenly. "But revenge won't get us home. Collins wouldn't want us throwing our lives away." Daniels glared but said nothing more, his jaw set like stone. They rested in shifts, but rest was shallow, haunted by distant gunfire and the knowledge that the enemy was out there, always watching. By afternoon, West fiddled with the radio trying to boost signal. Static hissed, voices crackled faintly, but nothing clear enough to call for extraction. Then a new sound broke the air. A low thump followed by a whistle. "Mortars. Out." Avery barked. The squad scrambled from the hut just as the first round slammed into it, blowing the fragile stone to dust and fire. Debris showered the slope, flames licking skyward. They dove behind rocks as more rounds pounded the earth, shaking the mountain. "Zeroed in on us already?" West coughed, covering his head. "They're chasing us with coordinates," Avery realized. "We're being tracked." "How?" Morales shouted over the blast. Avery's mind raced. "The radio? Their gear? Something on one of them?" His stomach clenched as the thought hit. "Check for trackers. Now." They ripped through their gear, stripping radios, checking weapons. Morales dug through his pack, tossing out ammo cans and rations. Nothing. Then Avery saw it. On Daniels's vest, near the strap. A small, blinking device, almost invisible. "Daniels, hold still." Avery ripped it free, smashing it against the rock. The light flickered, then died. Daniels's face went white. "What the hell is that?" "Beacon," Avery growled. "They tagged you back in that cave." "Or," West said grimly, "someone planted it on him before that." The squad exchanged looks, suspicion heavy in the air. Daniels bristled. "You think I'm working with them? After Collins?" His voice cracked with fury. "You think I'd?" "No one's saying that," Avery cut in firmly. "But trust just got thinner. And until we know more, we move double careful." The mortar fire ceased, the silence worse than the blasts. The enemy knew exactly where they were, and the hunt wasn't stopping. They pushed on, nerves raw, every shadow a threat. By nightfall, exhaustion clawed at them, but they pressed forward, driven by instinct and duty. Near midnight they crested another ridge and froze. Below them, in a hidden valley, an enemy camp sprawled across the basin. Dozens of fighters moved between tents and supply trucks, the glow of fires painting them in shifting silhouettes. At the center stood a larger tent, guarded heavily. And there, in the firelight, Avery saw him. The man from the cave. Calm. Controlled. Talking with subordinates like he owned the entire mountain. Morales exhaled slowly. "Well, there's your proof. He's not just some ghost story." Daniels gripped his rifle so tight his knuckles went white. "Let me take the shot." Avery grabbed his shoulder. "Too far, too many eyes. You fire, we die here." Daniels's chest heaved with suppressed rage, but he lowered the rifle. Avery scanned the camp, his mind calculating. Supplies, equipment, the central tent. It was a hub, maybe even the heart of the operation in these mountains. If they could cripple it, if they could bring it down, maybe they could shift momentum. But there were too many unknowns, too many risks. One wrong step and his entire squad would be erased. Still, the decision loomed. Move on, try to slip past unseen, or take the fight to them and strike a blow that would echo across the valley. The wind howled around them, carrying the faint voices of enemy soldiers below. The squad looked to Avery, waiting. Whatever he chose next would shape the mission, and their survival. And Avery knew there was no safe choice left. The valley below pulsed with enemy activity, a hive of motion under the glow of firelight. Avery crouched low, studying every detail. The guards at the perimeter, the lines of trucks, the heavily protected tent in the center where the man in fatigue stood like a commander surveying his kingdom. Daniel's breathing was ragged, his rifle trembling ever so slightly as he kept his scope trained on the target. Morales's jaw was clenched, sweat beading on his brow despite the cold. West fiddled with the radio, torn between wanting to call it in and knowing command had already refused close air support. "Boss," Morales whispered, "this is our chance. We cripple that camp, they'll feel it for months. Or we cripple ourselves," Avery murmured back. His eyes traced the valley. "Look at them. Dozens, maybe more. They're disciplined. This isn't some ragtag cell. That camp is organized, fortified, and sitting exactly where it can choke this entire mountain range." Daniel's voice cut in harsh and sharp. "He's right there, Avery. The man who killed Collins. We take him now. One clean shot. I can do it." Avery looked at him, seeing the wild fire in his eyes. Too wild. Too personal. Daniels wasn't just looking at the enemy, he was looking at revenge, and revenge made men sloppy. "Not yet," Avery said firmly. "One shot won't end this. He goes down, they scatter, and we're cut to ribbons before we can move. We need strategy." Daniel's knuckles whitened on the rifle grip. Strategy's what got Collins killed. The silence that followed was heavy, painful. West finally broke it, his voice low but steady. "We don't have the numbers for a frontal assault, but we could bleed them another way. Sabotage. Hit their supplies, their fuel, make them chase ghosts." Morales nodded. "Set charges on the trucks, light it up and slip out in the chaos. It won't kill their leader, but it'll hurt." Avery considered it, mind racing. Every decision carved into their future and every option carried risk. But the supplies, yes, that was leverage. "All right," he said at last. "We go in quiet. Morales, you handle charges. West, eyes and comms. Daniels, you're on overwatch. No rogue shots. You fire only when I say." "Understood." Daniel's jaw flexed. For a moment, Avery thought he'd argue, but then Daniels gave a stiff nod. "Understood." They waited for the darkest stretch of night before moving, slipping down the ridge like shadows. Every step was deliberate, every sound a threat. The camp grew larger with each breath, voices sharper, firelight brighter. The smell of smoke and oil thickened in the air. They reached the perimeter undetected, sliding into the tall grass where a guard patrolled lazily with a battered rifle slung over his shoulder. Avery crept forward, knife in hand. One quick movement, an arm around the man's mouth, steel sliding into his neck, and the guard crumpled silently. Avery lowered him to the ground, wiped the blade, and signaled forward. The trucks stood near the edge of the camp, their tanks filled with fuel, crates of ammunition stacked high in the beds. Morales moved with quiet precision, planting charges beneath each vehicle, his fingers steady despite the danger. West kept watch, eyes scanning every shadow, while Daniels lay prone on a rocky ledge above, rifle aimed, his breathing heavy in Avery's earpiece. "All set," Morales whispered after 10 minutes. One push of the button and boom. "Good," Avery said. "Exfil route stays east. Once it goes off we run." But before they could withdraw, voices shouted in the camp. Flashlights swept the darkness. A guard stumbled upon the body Avery had left behind. The alarm rang out, a harsh metallic clang that echoed off the valley walls. "Compromised," West hissed. "Hold position," Avery ordered. "Not yet." Enemy fighters swarmed, rifles raised, eyes scanning. They hadn't seen the SEALs yet, but the net was tightening. Then Daniel's voice cracked over comms, urgent. "I've got a clear shot on the bastard. He's out in the open. Give me the word." "No," Avery snapped. "Hold fire. I can end it now, Avery. For Collins." "Daniels, that's an order. Do not fire." The tension on the line was palpable, seconds stretching into eternity. Avery could almost feel Daniel's finger on the trigger, the war raging inside him. Then, without permission, the rifle cracked. The camp exploded into chaos. Fighters shouted, diving for cover, rounds spraying wildly into the dark. The target, the man in fatigues, stumbled but didn't fall. The round had missed by inches, chipping the post beside him. He barked orders, voice sharp, as men scrambled to hunt the intruders. "God damn it, Daniels?" Avery roared. "You just signed our death warrants. Then let's make it worth it." Daniels shouted back, already firing again. "Morales, blow it," Avery commanded. The night lit with fire as the charges detonated, trucks erupting into flames, fuel tanks turning the camp into an inferno. The shockwave slammed the fighters, scattering them in panic. Shrapnel whistled through the air, smoke boiling skyward. "Move!" Avery yelled. They sprinted east, weaving through the chaos as enemy fire lit the night. Tracers cut overhead, rounds sparking off rocks, the shouts of furious soldiers echoing behind. The mountain became a maze of fire and shadows. West stumbled, nearly falling as a round clipped his pack. Avery grabbed him, yanking him upright. Morales fired short bursts to keep the enemy's heads down, his machine gun a growling beast in the night. They reached the tree line, diving into cover as the camp burned behind them. The air reeked of fuel and blood, the flames casting the valley in hellish light. For a brief moment, silence. Then the voice, carried through loudspeakers in the camp, calm even amid the chaos. "You think you've won something tonight? But every step you take, I am still ahead of you. Run, soldiers. Run while you can." Daniel snarled, spitting into the dirt. "I had him. I swear I had him." Avery rounded on him, fury blazing. "You disobeyed a direct order. You compromised the mission. You endangered every one of us. Don't you dare tell me you had him." Danielle's face twisted, torn between guilt and defiance. "Collins deserved justice. Collins deserved you keeping your head in the fight," Avery snapped. The squad went silent, the only sound the crackle of fire in the distance. West finally broke it, his voice weary. "Doesn't matter now. They'll be hunting us twice as hard after this." Avery forced himself to breathe, to steady the rage threatening to consume him. He couldn't lose Daniels, not now, not like this, but discipline had to hold. "We keep moving," he said at last. "They'll sweep the area by dawn. We put distance between us and that camp." They trudged on, every muscle screaming, every nerve raw. The fire behind them faded to a dull glow, but the voice of their enemy lingered, taunting, promising the chase wasn't over. By morning they collapsed in a rocky outcrop overlooking a frozen stream, their bodies barely holding together. Morales slumped against a boulder, his machine gun across his lap. West fiddled with the radio again, searching for any sign of command. Daniel sat apart, staring at the ground, his hands trembling. Avery watched them all, his mind heavy. The map still sat in Danielle's pouch, the only tangible clue to the bigger game being played. The camp was crippled, yes, but the enemy leader was still alive, and worse, now he knew exactly who he was facing. And Avery couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle hadn't even started yet. The desert night pressed down on them like a heavy blanket, silent except for the rasp of their own breath and the distant rumble of armored engines somewhere beyond the horizon. They'd been moving for hours since the firefight near the canyon, each step weighted with exhaustion but fueled by something sharper, resolve. The squad had thinned, their faces gaunt and their eyes haunted, yet the bonds between them had hardened into iron. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were family, stitched together by shared wounds and the promise of finishing what they started. Danvers led the column, his rifle cradled in his hands like an extension of his body, scanning every dune crest and shadow for signs of movement. Behind him, Torres limped but refused to slow down, the fresh bandage on his leg still leaking through, while Jackson muttered under his breath about the sand working its way into every crevice of his gear and soul. And then there was Staff Sergeant Riley, stoic, commanding, the quiet backbone of the unit, walking at the rear, her eyes always alert, as if she could feel danger before it showed itself. They'd barely spoken since breaking contact. There was no need. Every soldier knew the mission: survive, regroup, and get to the extraction point. Yet beneath the silence, doubts festered. Were they already too late? Were they walking straight into another ambush? And above all, could they trust that headquarters hadn't written them off as expendable after everything that had happened? By the time the first stars bled into the sky, they reached the outer edge of a dry riverbed, a gash in the earth stretching for miles. Danvers raised his fist and the squad dropped low, moving into a huddle. "Recon drone was supposed to meet us here," Riley whispered, pointing at the coordinates glowing on her wrist display. "If it's not, we'll be blind heading into the city." Blind is what we've been since that minefield, Jackson said, bitterness dripping from his voice. HQ's been feeding us scraps while the enemy seems to know every move we make. Torres exhaled sharply. So what, you think we're compromised? Again? Jackson's jaw tightened. I think someone's selling us out and we keep paying the price. Riley's gaze swept over them, steady as stone. Keep it together. We don't have the luxury to point fingers right now. We finish this mission, then we ask the hard questions. Clear? Nobody answered at first. Then Danvers gave a small nod. Clear. One by one the others echoed it. The unity was fragile, but it was there. The drone never showed. Instead, they pushed forward into the riverbed, keeping low as shadows swallowed them. The sand was softer here, muffling their steps, but every crunch and whisper of fabric still felt deafening in the stillness. 4 hours they marched, broken only by short halts to drink tepid water and check bearings. It was Torres who first heard it, a faint metallic clatter ahead. He froze, hand shooting up, and the squad instantly dropped. They waited, breath shallow, until a figure emerged from the rocks ahead. For a second, everyone's rifles snapped up, safeties clicking off, until the figure raised her hands and called out softly. American unit? Don't shoot. Her accent was sharp but familiar. A woman, covered in dust and blood, staggered closer. She wore pieces of a coalition uniform, half torn, half burnt, her face bruised but her eyes alive with desperation. Identify yourself, Riley demanded, keeping her rifle steady. Lieutenant Hannah Orell, Intel Division, the woman gasped. My convoy was ambushed 2 days ago. I've been running ever since. Danvers exchanged a look with Riley. Every instinct screamed caution. The enemy had used plants before, captured soldiers turned into bait. Still, the raw tremor in Orell's voice didn't sound staged. You've got 10 seconds to tell me something only an intel officer would know, Riley said coldly. Orell didn't hesitate. Operation Emberfall. The failed strike last month. Classified after-action report flagged 3 discrepancies. One of them was your squad's sudden redeployment without notice. I read it. I know you were there. That landed like a hammer. The squad shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other. She was telling the truth or close enough. Riley lowered her weapon slightly but didn't sling it. Fine. You walk with us, you do exactly what I say. Pull anything suspicious, you won't get a warning shot. Understood. Yes, Sergeant, Orell said quickly. The squad absorbed her into the column, though unease lingered. Torres muttered under his breath to Danvers as they walked. This stinks. No drone, now some intel officer drops out of the sky? It's too neat. Maybe, Danvers whispered back. But if she's real, she could be the edge we need. Hours later, with dawn bleeding across the horizon, they crested the final ridge and saw it, the city. A jagged sprawl of concrete and steel rising from the desert floor, cloaked in smoke and dust. Their target lay inside, enemy command buried deep beneath layers of defenses. The mission that had cost them blood, trust, and sanity was finally within reach. But so was death. The approach was littered with patrols, checkpoints, and the constant drone of surveillance craft buzzing overhead. Riley gathered them in the shadow of a ruined wall, unrolling a tattered map. 2 options, she said quietly. We infiltrate through the sewer system here, which intel says connects directly to the inner compound. Risk is it might be compromised and will be boxed in if spotted. Or we ghost the outer perimeter and try to slip through the east side where patrol coverage is thinner, but that puts us in open ground longer. Neither sounds like a vacation, Jackson muttered. Welcome to the army, Torres shot back, forcing a weak grin. For the first time in days someone chuckled. The humor was dry, bitter, but it was enough to loosen the iron band around their chests. Orell leaned over the map. If I were them, I'd rig the sewers. But the east side? That's where supply trucks enter. Less security, more blind spots. It's riskier in exposure, but better once you're inside. Riley studied her, eyes narrowing. And you'd know that because? I was tracking their logistics before my convoy went down, Orell said evenly. Silence stretched. Finally, Riley looked up at the squad. Votes? Danvers exhaled. East side. East side, Torres echoed. Jackson rubbed his jaw. If it gets us out of this desert faster, I'll risk it. 3 against none. Riley gave a single nod. East side it is. Pack light, check ammo. Once we cross that ground, there's no going back. They moved like ghosts, sticking to shadows, weaving between half-buried husks of burned-out vehicles. Every heartbeat felt like thunder in their ears. Once, a patrol passed so close they could smell the enemy's sweat and hear the rattle of gear. Not one soldier breathed until the patrol vanished into the haze. Finally they reached the eastern checkpoint, a battered gate flanked by guard towers. Supply trucks rumbled through every few minutes, soldiers waving them past after perfunctory checks. The squad crouched behind a wreck, watching the rhythm, memorizing every pause, every blind angle. "This is it," Riley whispered. "We hitch onto the next truck. No noise, no mistakes." The plan was insane, but insanity was all they had left. When the next truck rolled in, they moved as one. Danvers and Jackson slipped under the chassis, clinging to the metal frame as it lurched forward. Torres and Orel darted to the rear, wedging themselves between crates. Riley climbed up last, pressing flat against the shadows, her rifle across her chest. The truck jolted forward and with it their fate. Through the narrow slats, Danvers saw the city swallowing them. Streets choked with rubble, walls plastered with propaganda, civilians moving like ghosts through the wreckage. They were in. Against every odd they were in. But as the truck rolled deeper, something shifted. Orel's hand twitched near her pocket, just enough for Riley to notice. In an instant, Riley's blade was at her throat. "Don't move," Riley hissed. The squad froze. Orel's eyes went wide, fear and guilt flashing at once. "What's in your pocket?" Riley demanded. Orel hesitated, then slowly pulled out a small device no bigger than a coin. A blinking transmitter. Danvers' stomach dropped. "You were leading us straight into a trap," Riley snarled. Orel's lip trembled. "You don't understand. They have my family. They'll kill them if I don't." Riley pressed harder with the blade. "And you were willing to kill us instead?" Torres' hands shook, rage burning in his eyes. Jackson muttered something about gutting her right there. Danvers, heart pounding, cut through the noise. "Wait. If they're tracking us, we can use it. Feed them false signals, draw them off, give ourselves a shot at hitting command before they realize." Riley's gaze stayed locked on Orel's. "She lives only if she helps us. The second she steps wrong, I finish it." Orel swallowed hard, tears streaking the grime on her face. "I'll do it. I swear. Just, don't let them kill my family." The truck rattled deeper into the city, every bump echoing like a drumbeat of destiny. The squad was fractured, their trust ripped open again, yet the mission loomed closer than ever. They weren't out of the minefield yet. In truth, they'd only stepped into a larger one. And as the city swallowed them whole, each soldier knew the next decision they made could be their last. The end.